Hello, this is Richard Leeson. Today we're going to be looking at doing the costing section in the facility portion of the NZP tool. And we're going to start with looking at a reminder of what we're trying to accomplish. So one of the things to remember is that we're doing a continuum of analysis and costing. So we go from a planning type costing, all which we can put in all the way up to a detailed project. We typically work in the planning up to this pre-investment grade, and then typically we turn, as we head up to this section, we turn this over to the costing section at the Army Corps at the districts, and they'll fill in the detailed rolled up costs. So the numbers that we have as defaults are way down here at the planning, and what we hope for is that as we do these studies and we get more information, that we can get it closer to our pre-investment grade or our feasibility type costing for the study, that you can actually fill paperwork out. Always remember that we go from the business as usual or our baseline base case, and we can go a continuum of goals as well. But once again, we got to remember about the base case, and that base case is all the money we are already spending or going to spend. So when we're looking at retrofit projects, we don't try to justify some of the things that we're already going to do. So typically, if we do a deep energy retrofit, we are going to, let's say, gut the building, redo the walls and floors and windows. So we don't necessarily need to justify that expense. That might already be done for an SRM. We're doing it for other reasons. What we're trying to do is say, hey, we want to do this better because of our goals, and we want to justify the additional expense that we can put in, that we can utilize to make the building more energy efficient, and then on beyond to our additional goals. And we've talked about this chart in the past. Okay, so let's get back to the section in the tool where we do our costs. It's under the facility loads tab. It's in we go to input. We're looking at energy, and we have a few places for these costs, and we just want to look at kind of what each of these inputs mean. So we do have a cost factor here at this install cost, and this is for the baseline base case, and this will get applied to everything upstream. And so this is a place to put in a generic cost or a generic cost increase that you want applied to everything. So it's almost like a costing factor you can put in at this point. This defaults at 0, and we typically leave this as 0. We typically don't deal with this. I think this is more of a special case. So this is not the numbers that we're trying to do here in the baseline. But when we go to our alternatives, and remember, our base case is our first alternative, as that loads, what we look at here is the package cost, and we see we have these install costs here. So let's go and look at this planned building right here. So we have this default, which is the first time this building persists as in an alternative, and it does persist in the base case. Remember, in the base case, we assume our planned buildings are being built and our demolished buildings are being demolished, and so the default cost, or the business as usual base case cost of that building, does not show up, like I said, unless there's a specific reason to. Now that this is the same install cost that you saw on the baseline for the existing buildings over there. Okay, so this has kind of the same function. We apply this if there's some need to add in a fixed cost for this project. We can put that in here if we need to justify that. But what we typically work with are these packages. And when we go to these packages, we see that we have this cost per square foot. So we take the cost of the package, we divide by the square foot of the building that we're building, and we put that dollar per square foot in here, which allows it to be a little bit more scalable, moving across building to building. So if you have a couple buildings of this in this facility group, but there are a couple different sizes, this allows that price to be to be sized, costed out accordingly. To a little bit bigger building will be a little bit higher cost. Smaller buildings could be smaller cost. But the key thing to remember about this is in these costs, when we have these multiple features down here, this is not the cost for each of these individual lines. It's the package cost that goes in here. So we see that especially in the HVAC. So it's not the $10, and this is the retrofit HVAC cost above and beyond what we would typically do, and or could be the cost for if we're doing this as standalone. But it's not for each of these individual pieces. So if we're not doing this entire package, if we're doing part of it or some of it, then we'd either have to increase or decrease. In this case, if we weren't doing some of these things here, we want to decrease this to get it accordingly. But like I said initially, these defaults are set up as planning costs, so these are just default costs to get these going in, and those default costs came from here. So projects were done in the past, and were done for we had worked with the COSs, and we went through and we were looking at energy efficiency measures. We did this for an ESA study, and we looked at the pricing it took to get there, and we've taken some of those typical prices and then tried to make it generalized and, like I said, planning defaults for all of our building types. So if you look across this building types, you kind of see the lower 48 average cost for that building here. This is the model size here. This is just to get it this is just to get the total cost here, so we can look at that, and we'll slide over there in a minute. But what we see is we kind of see the packages that go on. So this piece here is for the new construction. So we're looking at about $2 a square foot, adding lighting controls. In this case, we're probably already going with fairly good lighting. We look at what it would take to upgrade the equipment that we're using. This can be, in this case, for the dining facility, you have more equipment in the kitchens that you'll have to upgrade, so there's quite a bit higher cost there. We look at the envelope upgrade for the roof wall windows. We look at the reduced infiltration, HVAC packages, cool roof energy recovery, on and on and on. What we look at this point then, as we slide over here to the total cost, we see that the new building cost for this brigade headquarters would be on the order of $10 million. With if you put the energy packages, you'll see a 7% increase, and for that cost of those EEMs would be that difference. So it's 7% more. So we're seeing the 7, 8, 10, 8, 10, 7, 7, and from our projects, we saw that we did see a range like 5 to 15 when we looked at a new construction for some of these high efficiency new buildings. And so we try to make sure that we don't overcost things in here, because we overcost them. So we want to take into account not only the benefits of the integration of the energy efficiency, we also want to make sure that we get the benefits from, as we're doing these energy efficiency measures, that we're integrating the effects of those energy efficiency measures as well in the costing. And so we're doing this all together so that we don't cost ourselves out of the project by putting in caution or whatever in the pricing, so it doesn't get overpriced. And so we try to think of what this would be as a mature price, or people who've done this a lot. We're not putting the risk factor in for kind of new technology. So a lot of this stuff is fairly off the shelf, and people know what this costs. So those are the type of costs that we want to put in here. Now for our existing buildings, we're looking at the delta cost. In some cases, for the electric and equipment, we're looking at the cost of upgrading these to putting in controls, maybe better lamps in here. But we're still looking at that delta cost. We're going to be doing something that's going to justify kind of the base case. So whatever we can put in that base case, we're looking at the cost above that base case cost to justify with our energy savings. And once again, we look at that kind of the cost of the building. We look at the in this case, we don't have that here. It exists, but we're looking at this delta cost for renovation sitting above the original building cost, which is here. So we value the building, we take it by that square footage, and then we see what that increase would be above that. So this is the investment you would make in the different packages above that. And so what we do is, now that we've looked at where these costs come from, and this is, like I said, this is where the defaults are for the tool. Well, we come back here and we see that's where these costs do show up. We have those for all the different packages. And the other thing we're going to look at here is this based on again. All right, so we see this based on here. So if we look at the lighting package, currently it's based on this default. Okay, so that basically says that you have 0 for this plus whatever this cost is here. And then as we continue up, we see that the equipment package is now based on the lighting package. So the based on for the energy accrual and the costing accrual are determined by this based on. So let's just look at this. So we have the envelope is based on equipment. So far everything is summing up or accruing. The infiltration is based on the envelope, so that's all going to be accrued. And we see the HVAC is based on infiltration, that accrues. We see the VRF is based on the HVAC. So this is getting a look at what it would be if we went to a variable refrigerant cooling system. It's based on the HVAC, what that buy-up would be. But when we go to the daylighting package, it's not based on VRF. So these others are. So this is kind of the atypical package in here, and so it's kind of looked at in isolation. It gives you an option to look at, but then the things that go beyond that kind of are on the more typical path, and so that's what you'll see here. So this is the base case. The packages are here because you might have to put something in that base case. So you might have already done the lighting, and so you'd actually, in the base case, instead of selecting default, you'd actually have to select the lighting. And then if the lighting's already done, of course, you would take that base case and you'd have to zero that cost out because it would be in the base case. Later on, when we create that better and best alternatives, then we need to go through and adjust all those costs by this. So what has already been done in the base case will have already been taken account here in the base case, what we select. So in other words, the options are here in case if you have all of these features in place. But as we go forward, the alternatives most of the time do not, and so we will have all those packages. In this study, we are assuming that the defaults are going to be our base case, so those are all zeroed out, and we're going to continue with those assumptions. Now previously we've added the baseline and base case. We haven't really done anything with these costs at this point. But the nice part is if we adjust the costs in the base case as we copy these forward, if we take these packages and we copy those costs forward, and we haven't talked about copying alternatives yet, and we'll talk about that, but we also copy all these parameters, including these cost parameters. So if we want things to carry forward, we want to do a very good job in setting up our base case, and then as we copy that will carry forward as well. And so we'll like, once again, if we follow the process, we will keep our work at being the most efficient as we go through this process. So we can adjust all these costs now, and if not, we definitely want to be prepared to put in the costs that are appropriate when we do put in the better and best case. So if we have adjustments, so we can look at these package costs, like I said, we pulled that spreadsheet up there based on that. You can see all that, but we're going to see then how that plays out. Now in this we've already run these, and we'll see that. So we come to our simulation, and since we didn't change anything, we were just looking at the costs. But even in this instance, when you do change those costs, it will reset things, even if it doesn't really change much, just to it just checks to see if something's been changed. If it has, then it resets it. So it'll go through this step very rapidly, since the energy parameters may or may not have changed accordingly. But just to make sure everything is updated, it will at least come here and do this check. So what happens is we go on to this package selection step. The baseline doesn't show up. There's nothing there to select. It is the baseline. It is one option. But the base case, like I said previously, may or may have different options in it that we want to account for, and say we're already going to do those. And so we don't want to look at accounting for something in an alternative that we've already done or will have done. So we look at each of these, and what if we select the baseline for everything, we would hit this select baseline, and that's what we did. So we did select the baseline, and which also has all those zero costs. But we can come here and look at what's going on with these. And so as you see here, the baseline has been selected because none of the alternatives have. If you look in the plan, the default is selected. But let's go ahead and look at what's here. We're going to look at this to see the energy and to see how the costs play out here. So we can change the units. These will change all the energy units here to whatever we would like to see for all these categories. But we're just going to go ahead and leave it here at kBTUs for now. Let me go ahead and expand this out, and then let's take a look at what we have here. So as previously, this is an existing building, so the starting point for the envelope is not quite as efficient, and so some of these initial packages do have a lot of impact on the building. We see that when we add these, we get 18 all the way on up to about 55%. And so we've looked at this, and we've seen that the energy does go down, and we see that in the gas usage and the electric usage. We should also realize in cases like this that when we do reduce the lighting, we do get a benefit from that reduction. The lighting electric goes down, but know that this is a integrated solution, and so you'll actually see in some cases that depending on the climate zone and building type and all that the heating energy will go up. So you get a little bit of, from the heat off the lights, you'll get a little bit of offset that you'll have to make up again on the heating side. And depending on the building, depending on the situation, this can be small, as it is in this case. There's a little bit of an increase, or it can be surprisingly, it can be significant. So it's just to know that this is integrated and does account for that. But generally, we see that in this case that the electric usage is much larger than the gas increase. So overall, we see a utility cost reduction. We also have different rates on these, and that is also all accounted for as we're doing this. So we see that we get this decrease in the utilities. But here is where we start seeing that package install cost. Okay, so we have that dollar piece per square foot coming in here for the infiltration, and you can see it's not $3, it's $2, but you see it just keeps accruing. You had the HVAC in this case was I thought it was 10, but it looks more like it's 8 in this case. If you take 3 from there, you get 8. We'd have to go back and look at that exact number. The daylighting package, adds a couple dollars more, and you can see it just accrues on up in this case. So you see that your enhancement is this is your investment. So you take that dollar per square foot times the size of the buildings, all the buildings that are in this, not just one, but all the buildings that are in that facility group. And in this case, if I'm guessing $1 here, it looks like there's about 461,000 square feet of this existing pre-1980 instruction building. And so when you just ramps on up. So it goes from nothing for the baseline all the way up to about 10 million. But this is the annualized cost. So this is the annual utility cost plus, and you see that at the baseline, so the utility cost just goes straight over per year. But then you take this by the study life, and so you divide that out and you add that to that utility cost, and then we can see how that plays out here. Now, if you remember when I when I put that chart up and how we do the costing, it starts out here at the base case and we see this is a theoretical look at this. We're going to look at, in this case, we're going to look at the numbers in these couple cases here. So right now, here's that GIB existing pre-1980, and I've taken those numbers and just put them here. So remember, the energy reduction was from about 0 to 55%. Utility cost decreased. The package cost went from nothing on up to, the cool roof is where I stopped here. The enhancement cost and the total annualized cost. And what we see here is that total annualized cost. That was that curve, and we see it. It starts out at the base case, comes down, and then as these different packages go in, you kind of there's that general shape you're looking for there, and it depends on what the energy benefit is, because here's your utility cost coming down. You can see that initially it drops fast, levels out, but there's still a reduction through this entire piece, and this is the total cost. So this red line actually runs from 0 to 10 million. So right here, 0 to, in this case I didn't put the last option or so in because we stopped it here typically, and so we looked at about 0 to 9 million for this. And so we see these costs come into play, and this is kind of the lowest cost of ownership right here when you do the lighting. So you got that's why these guys normally pay for themselves, this infiltration and lighting. So you can almost do this. These can be standalone. They will almost pay for themselves right here. And then we start seeing this increase in total cost of ownership going back up as we put in things that, drops the utility cost, but not as much as the investment. But in many cases, depending on how much of this is in the advanced equipment versus the base case, we wouldn't want to, we may, that price can change and shift. So that's why we're looking at the delta cost on this and not the entire cost. If we looked at, it would probably cost more than that to put all the equipment in. But if the equipment's getting old and we had to replace it anyway, all that would be in the base case. And so we're just having to say, okay, instead of replacing that with typical equipment, we would go with this more high efficient equipment, and that's what we're trying to justify doing in this analysis. We're looking at trying to justify the piece that we'd want to invest above and beyond what we would typically do. And so that's the piece. Now when we look at we'll come back here and we'll pop up the we'll pull up this plan as well, and you can keep pulling these up. You see they stack here, and we'll look and see where these numbers came from again. So here we have the default case. So this is what the building would cost if we had no enhancements. We add the envelope package infiltration, and remember that default case is now at an ASHRAE, in this case 90.1, and so it's already a lot better. So when we add the envelope, we don't get quite the improvement we would when we come up with a pre-1980, not very insulated, not very good windows. But we're still increasing it above and beyond our base case. In this case is pretty good at 90.1, so we want to push beyond that. But we still see that we get a reduction in our utility costs, and we still see right here in this case we might see an increase. Now this is where we put that investment piece in here, because later on those reductions in loads will pay for themselves in HVAC sizing, in things down the road, also increase comfort and resiliency as we go forward. So there's other reasons why we want to invest in all these packages, even if they increase a little at some, because then overall we'll see that it does come down, and some of these other packages will then pay for itself. So let's go back to that chart and let's take a look at that at the plan instruction. So we had the baseline, we had the envelope, we see the infiltration. Now we get a bigger bang, and this is going tighter than a retrofit building. Even better lighting, HVAC. We're looking at daylighting. We can look at daylighting options in a new building. It's hard to do that in a retrofit. they're typically, it's a lot of design that initially goes into that, and of course looking at the equipment. Now the order has changed, and that's because in an existing building, what we look at is we try to do the things that have a chance of paying for themselves or need to be done. So many times the infiltration, lighting, and many times equipment's up there as well, but it depends on the age, because when we get to the age of the HVAC and the equipment, depends if how much of that's in the base case versus how much we're trying to justify. So depending on the building, this order can change, and of course we have some changes that we can look at with the based on. So if we wanted to really skip something, let's say we didn't really want to look at the daylighting, in this case it's just daylighting controls. If we wanted to skip that, we can just change the base on, and it would just skip over that, and we would not see that in the accrued amount here as we picked our package out here. So we have some control. We have the kind of the subject matter expert path through this, and we look at these costs, and we see how this. But the real power in all this is once we make these selections here in, when we make these selections here, in this case it's only in the base case. Once we make these selections, it all gets rolled up and all analyzed as we go to our results. And that's the power, is that we roll up the entire installation to get that look at the installation. And so we come here, and everything is rolled up at that level. And we've looked at this previously, but just quickly in review, we've gone from 53 facilities to 65. Our total area has increased, and we can see this quickly through here, and that costing numbers are out here at the end. So we didn't look at this much last time, but we see that. So even with our getting rid of some of our older stock and putting in some newer stock, we see these changes here. We see that we're basically doing, it's not that we're not investing anything, we're not doing any delta increase investments due to this energy efficiency piece. And then we can see what our total annualized cost is here when we look at rolled up for all the energy costs. In this case it's all the energy, since there's no investments being annualized. And that's typically what we do at the facility end. So we look at that, we can see that investment. Then obviously the energy and those costing numbers get rolled forward into the installation section, and at that point we go into that next section, and we'll be covering that next. So thank you, and that's all we have for this, and